before the sound of wagon wheels, before fences cut across the land, before maps named the rivers and mountains, there existed an untouched world known only to the wind, the sky, and the people who lived in quiet harmony with both. This was the Great Plains of North America, a land so vast and open that it seemed to stretch without end, merging earth and sky into a single horizon. In the early morning, mist clung to the grasses like a thin veil, shimmering in the first light of dawn. The world was calm then. The only movement was the slow bending of tall prairie grass under the breath of a gentle breeze. It was a landscape of subtle sounds, the soft chirring of insects hidden among the roots of wildflowers, the distant call of birds gliding above, the rustle of wind travelling unbroken for hundreds of miles. By midday, the plains transformed. Golden grasses rippled like ocean waves, bending beneath the power of the wind. The sun drifted high overhead, casting long shadows of antelope, prairie wolves, and wild horses that roamed these lands long before settlers arrived. In summer, the air shimmered with heat. In winter, snow swept across the land in endless white sheets, settling into every hollow and ravine. Across this vast expanse lived the buffalo hunting nations, peoples such as the Lakota, Comanche, Cheyenne, Crow, Blackfoot, Pawnee, and Kiowa. Their way of life did not rely on permanent towns or enclosed walls. Their home was wherever the buffalo roamed. Their shelters, teepees made of buffalo hide, stretched over tall wooden poles, stood firmly against wind and rain, yet could be dismantled quickly when it was time to follow the herds. The buffalo was not simply an animal of the plains. It was the plains itself, living and breathing. The buffalo fed the tribe, sustained it, clothed it, protected it from the cold. Its hide became shelter. Its meat was dried and stored for harsh winters. Its bones were shaped into scrapers, arrowheads, tools, and needles. Its sinew was used to form bowstrings and thread. Even its skull, carried to sacred places, was honored in ceremonies of gratitude. In this land, nothing was wasted. Everything held purpose. To witness a herd was to witness the pulse of the earth. Sometimes numbering in the tens of thousands, buffalo moved like dark clouds rolling across the land. From a distance, they appeared as a slow-moving shadow. But as they drew nearer, the sound grew. First a faint murmur, then a deep vibration in the ground, then a thunder of hooves so constant it blended with the heartbeat. Dust rose from their movement and drifted into the sky like smoke, while the grasses, flattened under their weight, slowly sprang back to life once the herd had passed. The people moved with the seasons. In spring, when ice melted and rivers swelled with snowmelt, buffalo calves were born across the plains. The world smelled of wet earth, blooming sagebrush, and fresh grass. The camps were set near rivers where fish could be caught and hides washed and softened. In summer, the grasses grew tall and strong, and the great hunts were planned. Horses, descendants of animals once brought across the ocean by Europeans, but now woven into the life of the plains tribes, grazed near the camps, their breaths warm in the cool morning air. Autumn arrived like a painting of red, amber, and gold. The wind carried the scent of drying leaves, ripened berries, and smoke from distant camps. Hunters returned with meat, and women dried it into thin strips over low fires, storing it for the long months of cold ahead. Animal hides were stretched and scraped, turned into robes and blankets. Snow began to fall in winter. cloaking everything in a silent, colourless world. The camps moved closer to sheltered valleys, river groves, or wooded areas where firewood could be gathered and cold winds broken by trees. At night, the plains belonged to the stars. Without towns or lanterns to dim them, the stars shone with ancient brilliance. The sky was an enormous dome of glimmering light, crossed by the pale river of the Milky Way. Families slept within their warm tepees while fires burned low, their embers pulsing gently in the darkness. The hides of the shelters glowed softly from within, and outside the snow glistened like fine crystal dust. Wolves sometimes howled in the distance, yet the night remained peaceful, held within the protective embrace of land, sky, fire, and tradition. This was not a world of kings or castles, marble temples or written records. It was a world of memory, carried in songs, in dances, in the quiet passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. A world shaped by respect for the land, for the animals, for the seasons, and for the invisible forces that move through wind, water, and fire. This was the spirit of the buffalo hunters. This was life on the Great Plains before the world changed. When seasons change and the air begins to cool, the movement of the buffalo herds determines where the people travel. As the sun rises, casting pale gold across the tall grass, the vast open land gradually reveals itself, softly, quietly. In this calm light, the village becomes visible, clusters of pale brown teepees standing in careful formation, arranged according to tradition, like stars positioned within a constellation. Some sit close to fresh water along the bend of a river, while others rest near the edge of cottonwood groves and quiet streams. The teepee, constructed from buffalo hides and long wooden poles, holds a balance of strength and simplicity. The way the poles cross near the top, the way the smoke hole faces the sky. Each piece serves a purpose. When the wind shifts across the plains, the teepee stands firm, and when the people must travel, it can be taken down and carried across the land. A shelter that moves with the seasons, yet still holds the warmth of a home. Inside, the air is soft and dim. The canvas of sewn buffalo hide glows faintly when touched by sunlight. In the center lies a small fire pit where smoke curls gently upward, escaping through the opening at the top. Around the fire are layers of animal skins and woven mats that line the floor, soft places where people sit, sleep, and shape the daily life of the camp. Within this space, daily tasks begin long before the sun reaches its highest point. Beds of dried grass and fur are shaken and cleaned. The remaining ash from last night's fire is brushed aside, and new firewood, gathered from the plains or the riverbed, is placed at the center. The slow rising of heat begins to soften the cold air. The smell of smoke, burning sage, and dried buffalo meat becomes part of the morning atmosphere. Outside, the camp, still and quiet, begins to transform. Horses shift in the tall grass, their breaths visible in the cold. Dogs move between the teepees, seeking leftover scraps, trailing along the frost-covered ground. As the sun climbs, the light strengthens, and the colors of the plains begin to emerge. The amber hue of dry grass, the deep brown of the bison hides, the pale ribbons of river water snaking through a landscape of open soil. Within the village, many tasks begin quietly but steadily. Hides from previous hunts are stretched and scraped, softened by hand and treated with natural oils. Bones are shaped with flint into tools, scrapers, sewing needles, arrow points. Ropes and strings are made from sinew, dried from the animals and strengthened by patient twisting. The smell of crushed corn, dried berries, and meat being ground to make pemmican drifts through the air. Feathers, beads, and porcupine quills are chosen for decoration, each item belonging to a person who will soon wear or carry it. By midday, the teepee circle becomes a center of quiet movement, but not of noise. There is no rush, only rhythm. The work continues, piece by piece, following the patterns that have always been. A cluster of horses may graze, while others are guided into preparation for travel or for hunting. The rhythm of cutting, weaving, bending, shaping, and cleaning carries on, guided by practiced hands. Beyond the edge of the camp, the plains are still, but beneath the stillness, a soft pressure moves, the awareness of the buffalo. From the distant horizon, the herds emerge and disappear like waves that do not make sound. The people know their patterns. They know when the animals will be close and when the hunters must prepare. As the day progresses, the sun begins to lower. The shadows grow longer. The sky shifts from pale blue to amber, then to deeper tones. The teepee walls change color as the sun's warmth fades, and smoke from evening fires rises into the coming darkness. By night, the camp becomes quiet once again. Stars fill the sky. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a pale river of ancient light. Within the teepees, the final fires burn low. The sounds of scraping tools and crackling flames fade into the cold air. On the horizon, the buffalo continue to move, slowly, silently, across the darkened sea of grass. And as the plains fall into darkness, this rhythm remains unchanged. Before the sound of hooves and the motion of the chase, there are many quiet days of preparation. The buffalo herds, though they move across the plains in great numbers, do not simply appear. Their presence must be understood. How they travel, where they drink, how the wind moves across their bodies and pushes their scent through the grass. For the people of the plains, the hunt does not begin with speed or danger. It begins with observation. The camp remains still in the earliest hours of the day. The sun has not yet risen, and the air is pale and cold. Horses stand in the grass with dark, quiet eyes. Frost gathers in patches, on the tips of tall grass, and on the smooth curve of buffalo hide teepees. A thin layer of smoke drifts from last night's campfire, still clinging to the cold air before the heat of the coming sun begins to lift it. As the light grows stronger, preparations begin. Within the teepee circle, the work of many days comes together. The shaping of tools, the mending of clothes, the care of horses, all must be ready before the hunt can happen. Horses and movement. The horses are the first to be cared for. They are brushed and checked for strength, for any sign of injury or strain. Hooves must be trimmed or wrapped if necessary. Coats are cleaned of dried mud or frost. Some horses have known the sound of running herds before and remain calm. Others, younger and untested, are restless, dark eyes shifting toward the horizon. The herd animals on the plains may move slowly, but when the wind changes or danger appears, they can run with great force. Horses must be strong enough to match them, but also calm enough to wait in stillness. They are tethered near the edge of the camp, where prairie grass grows and water from recent rains still clings to the soil. Tools and weapons. Not far from the horses, tools are prepared. Bows are checked for tension. Arrows are carved and fletched with feather and sinew. stone or bone, points fixed with hardened glue, made from animal fat and ash. Knives are sharpened, some from flint, some from traded metal. Larger tools must also be ready. Heavy scrapers for cleaning hides, bone tools for shaping, and stone hammers to crack marrow from the bones once a kill is made. Beside the fire, strips of sinew are softened with water and stretched, ready to be used for repairs on clothing, shields, and bowstrings. Nothing is wasted. Even the smoke from the fire carries the scent of sage, used to keep insects from clothing and to prepare the mind for the work ahead. The gathering of food and materials. Before the hunt, the people must be strong. Food is prepared steadily over several days. Last year's buffalo meat, dried and kept safe from insects, is boiled and made into soup. Corn and squash are traded from farming tribes of the eastern plains and cooked over the fire. Berries, gathered in summer, are mashed and dried to be used for nourishment on the journey. Some of the meat and berries are combined into dense travel rations. Pemmican, meant to sustain hunters during long days away from camp when no fire can be made. The knowing of the herd. Beyond all tools and food, the most important task is to understand the buffalo themselves. Some of the people travel far from the camp, across ridges and low hills, to look for signs. They move slowly, often through tall grass or behind thickets of willow and cottonwood. They search for dark shapes in the distance, for fresh tracks in the soil, for patterns in the way the grass has been trampled. They look for the colour of water on the ground, left from the animals drinking, or for the clouds of dust the herd may have raised on the horizon. They pay attention to the wind. If the wind is wrong, the smell of camp or horses will drift toward the herd, and the animals will scatter before the hunters even arrive. So the direction of travel must match the direction of the breeze. By the time the sun sets, a plan has been shaped, not spoken, but understood. A stretch of plains has been chosen, horses are ready, tools and rations are prepared. The time for movement is near. As the sky darkens, the camp becomes quiet again. The only sounds are the soft shifting of animals, the cold whisper of grass in the darkness, and the crackling of fire as it burns low. Tomorrow may bring the thunder of hooves. Tonight, the people rest and listen to the wind. They pay attention to the wind. If the wind is wrong, the smell of camp or horses will drift toward the herd, and the animals will scatter before the hunters even arrive. So the direction of travel must match the direction of the breeze. By the time the sun sets, a plan has been shaped, not spoken, but understood. A stretch of plains has been chosen, horses are ready, tools and rations are prepared. The time for movement is near. As the sky darkens, the camp becomes quiet again. The only sounds are the soft shifting of animals, the cold whisper of grass in the darkness, and the crackling of fire as it burns low. Tomorrow may bring the thunder of hooves. Tonight, the people rest and listen to the wind. As winter loosened its grip on the endless grasslands, the world of the plains began to stir with gentle intention rather than haste. The snowdrifts that once lay deep and silent around the lodges began to shrink, their edges softened by the patient warmth of the returning sun. Water trickled down from frozen creek banks, forming silver threads that wound through the prairie and pooled into quiet bends of the river. The great herds of buffalo were still far to the south. Yet the people felt the subtle signs that the land was waking, breathing, preparing itself for life once more. In the villages, daily life moved like a low, steady drumbeat. Smoke curled from the tops of lodges, thin at first, then stronger, as fires burned through the early morning chill. Inside, women crushed dried meat and berries into powdered mixtures for travel food, while elders warmed their hands by the embers and recalled the winds of seasons long past. Children gathered fallen twigs, their breath fogging the air as they moved between shadows and light. The bitter cold of winter was no longer a threat, but a memory that clung softly to the skin, lingering until spring fully claimed the earth. Beyond the camp, the prairie stretched outward, golden in some places, pale and frost-touched in others. Herds of deer moved quietly through the brush, picking at the first shoots of grass. Birds returned to the sky in thin, waving lines, their wings glinting in the rising sunlight. Their calls seemed to awaken the plains themselves, echoing across the valleys where rivers slithered around sleeping stones. Men ventured out to track the movements of the land. They searched for signs, hoofprints in the mud, wind-bent grasses that hinted at passing elk, and the far-off silhouettes of birds circling where life stirred hidden among low ridges. This was not yet a season of great hunts, but of patience and preparation. Arrows were straightened, fletched with new feathers, and tips sharpened from chipped stone and bone. Bowstrings were tightened with care, stretched and tested against the tension of a warrior's hand. In the heart of the village, the rhythm of creation filled the air. Sewing needles carved from bone slid through tanned hides. Soft robes and warm clothing were repaired after the harshness of winter. Feathers, beads, and painted symbols were sewn into garments, not as decoration alone, but as quiet acts of memory and prayer. Each stitch whispered of the buffalo spirit, of the sun's journey across the sky, of ancestors who once walked this same soil. As the days grew longer, the earth began to smell of damp soil and waking roots. Beneath the surface, seeds slept no more. Women tended to their hidden gardens near the riverbanks, where the soil was dark and rich. They pressed kernels of corn deep into the earth's cradle, then beans and squash, the three sisters, whose vines would soon rise and twist together in harmony. These gardens were small compared to the great expanse of the plains, but they were sacred spaces, no less important than the hunt. From them came sustenance when the herds wandered far and the sky withheld its mercy. Evenings carried a soft hush. As the sun dipped behind faraway hills, the sky became a canvas of violet, rose, and deep indigo. Stars began to awaken one by one. The lodges glowed from within, small circles of warmth amid the vast cold of the coming night. The smell of roasted meat and simmering broth drifted through the camp. People gathered around quiet fires not to speak, but simply to be near one another. Elders sat closest to the warmth, faces lit by the flames, their eyes reflecting both ancient memory and the flickering future. Far beyond the lodges, the plains darkened into mystery. Coyotes sang to the moon, their voices rising in wavering cries from distant hills. The river whispered against stones, carrying the melting remnants of winter toward the sea. All around the world breathed slowly, as though in prayer, and somewhere just beyond the horizon, unseen but deeply felt, the buffalo were beginning their great return. Their hooves would soon drum upon the earth once more. Grass would bend beneath them like waves beneath the wind. The people waited, not with impatience but with reverence, knowing that life, like the seasons, arrives in its own sacred time. The earth had fully awakened. Spring's gentle murmur had grown into a quiet song, and with it came the first great tremors of life returning to the plains. Dawn broke across an ocean of grass, casting amber light along the rolling hills. The wind carried the scent of damp soil, sagebrush, and something more, something that stirred ancestral memory within every heart that listened. It was the buffalo. Long before they could be seen, the people sensed them, felt the tremble of distant hooves in the bones of the earth. Birds circled in wide spirals above the southern horizon, and the air itself seemed to hum with anticipation. Elders lifted their eyes to the sky and nodded softly. Children paused in their play. Hunters set aside their tools and stood motionless, listening to the breath of the land. Soon dark shapes emerged, like drifting storm clouds against the awakening prairie. First a few, then dozens, then uncountable hundreds. Buffalo. Their heavy heads swayed with the rhythm of their stride, horns glinting beneath the morning sun. Dust rose around their hooves, turning the light into a golden haze. The plains, silent through the long winter, now pulsed with life. The people of the village gathered outside their lodges and watched in stillness. There was no cheering, no loud celebration, only reverent silence. The buffalo were not merely animals, they were life, sustenance, spirit. Preparations began as though guided by instinct older than memory. Men gathered in the great circle, their faces painted with sacred symbols, thunderbirds, sun circles, and marks of their clans. Feathers from eagles and hawks were braided into their hair, whispering of sky and wind. Their bows, newly strung, sang with tension. Spears gleamed, tipped with carefully sharpened stone. Horses, slender yet strong, were brushed and adorned with fringed leather and small talismans to protect them on the hunt. Before dawn the next day, a sacred fire was lit in the center of the village. Its smoke rose straight into the pale sky like a prayer. The elders stepped forward, voices low and ancient, speaking to the spirits of the land. They offered tobacco, powdered sage, and fragments of dried sweetgrass to the flames. A hush fell as the wind shifted, carrying the smoke toward the herd grazing beyond a distant ridge. It was a sign the spirits had heard. Women prepared travel food, pemmican made of dried meat, tallow, and chokeberries, packed into skins and tied securely. They gathered needles, sinew thread, and scraping tools, knowing they would soon be needed to transform hide into shelter, clothing, and rope. Children watched in wide-eyed silence, sensing that something sacred was about to unfold. When the sun broke the horizon with a final burst of gold, the hunters mounted their horses. The ground trembled. Voices rose, not in shouts, but in low, steady chants. Songs passed down from fathers and grandfathers filled the air, carrying with them the spirit of the buffalo and the people's promise to honor the life they were about to take. Then the hunt began. Hooves thundered across the plains. Horses leapt over low shrubs, their breath steaming in the cool morning air. The buffalo moved like a living river, fluid, powerful, eternal. Hunters rode alongside them, leaning low, bows drawn or spears poised. Arrows flew silent and swift. Some struck true, guided by prayer and wind. Others missed and were swallowed by the soil, never to be seen again. It was not chaos, but rhythm, an ancient dance between hunter and herd. Dust clouded the sky. Hooves beat like drums. Hearts pounded in unison. No buffalo fell in vain. When the hunt ended, the prairie was quiet once more, save for the soft sigh of wind through grass. The people moved with purpose and gratitude. Knives shaped from obsidian and bone cut through thick hide. Women and older children worked beside the hunters, soaking hides, separating sinew, gathering bones, each part of the buffalo destined for use. Meat was sliced thin for drying. Hides were stretched and staked to the ground, soon to become lodges, robes, shields, and cradle boards. Nothing was wasted. Even the buffalo's heart was set aside for offering. As dusk fell, fires glowed across the camp like stars fallen to earth. Smoke curled skyward, carrying prayers of thanks. The smell of roasting buffalo meat drifted through the air, rich and comforting. Drums began to sound, slow at first, then stronger. Voices rose in song. Children danced on the edges of the firelight, shadows flickering upon their faces. Elders watched, their eyes shimmering with the reflections of flame and memory. Above them, the sky unfolded into a canopy of countless stars. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like the path of migrating buffalo, guiding spirits home. Coyotes howled from distant hills, not in hunger, but in recognition. Life had returned, the herd had come, and for one more season, the bond between the people, the land, and the buffalo held strong, unbroken, sacred, eternal. The morning after the hunt dawned soft and clear, the prairie stretching endlessly under a pale sky streaked with gold. The air carried the mixed scents of fresh earth, smoked meat, and damp hide. Life in the village resumed, but it had changed. Imbued now with the pulse of the hunt, the rhythm of survival, and the sacred presence of the buffalo whose sacrifice had nourished them. Men, women, and children moved together with quiet coordination. Every action was deliberate, every motion respectful. The buffalo had given their lives willingly, or so the people believed, and in return, nothing would be wasted. The meat was cut into long strips and hung on wooden racks to dry in the wind, preserving it for the coming months. Some pieces were boiled into rich, hearty broths that filled the lodges with warmth and scent. Children watched and learned, carefully mimicking the hands of their elders, understanding that skill and reverence went hand in hand. Hides were washed and stretched, then prepared for clothing, bedding, and shelter. Women scraped every layer of hair from the hides with care, their fingers moving in steady, practiced strokes. Once softened, the hides were cut and sewn, transformed into robes, leggings, moccasins, and ceremonial garments. Each stitch was a prayer, a story, a connection to the spirit of the buffalo, the sun, and the ancestors who had walked these same lands. Feathers, beads, and symbolic paints were added, honoring the animal's sacrifice and embedding it into the fabric of everyday life. Bones, sinews, and antlers became tools and weapons. Bones were carved into awls, scrapers, and knife handles. Sinew was dried and twisted into strong threads for sewing, bowstrings, and traps. Antlers were shaped into digging tools and ceremonial objects. Even the hooves and stomachs found purpose. Hooves were boiled down to create glue, while stomachs were used for storage or as drums during sacred ceremonies. Nothing returned to the earth without meaning, and every part of the buffalo carried its own story. Amid these labors, the village remained alive with a quiet energy. Children raced between lodges, their laughter mingling with the creaking of drying racks. Elders moved slowly, but every gesture carried authority and guidance, passing knowledge through demonstration and story. Fires burned continuously, offering warmth, cooking, and a focal point for both labour and community gathering. The spiritual life of the village was deeply intertwined with this practical work. Offerings of tobacco and sweetgrass were placed on newly stretched hides, songs of thanks were sung, and prayers were whispered to the wind, the sun, and the herd, now resting in spirit. These rituals reinforce the belief that the hunt was more than sustenance. It was a sacred dialogue with the earth, a covenant between the people and the buffalo. Daily tasks were balanced with teaching and storytelling. Around fires, elders recounted tales of legendary hunters, great migrations, and the wisdom of animals. Children listened, eyes wide and minds open, absorbing lessons about patience, courage, and respect. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were living instruction, guiding the young in ways to move, hunt, and live in harmony with the plains. Evenings in the village were soft and contemplative. The sun dipped low, painting the prairie in deep amber and violet hues. Shadows stretched across the grass as the wind whispered through the lodges. Families gathered together, sharing meals and quiet conversation, each aware of their connection to the land and the herd that had sustained them. Coyotes sang in the distance, stars began to pierce the twilight sky, and the river murmured a lullaby as it carried water from distant hills to the open plains. Through these cycles of work and worship, the people of the Great Plains understood a profound truth. Life was not taken lightly, nor given without gratitude. The buffalo were both providers and teachers, their presence shaping the rhythm of human existence. From hunting to crafting, from tending the earth to gathering in ceremony, every action was an expression of reverence, a way to honor the delicate balance of the world around them. The plains breathed with them. The people moved as one with the land, the sky, and the herd, and in that movement, they found a quiet, enduring peace, a sacred rhythm that would guide them through the seasons to come. As the weeks passed, the buffalo had grazed and moved beyond the immediate reaches of the village, and the people followed in careful harmony with the herds. Life on the plains was never still. The wind carried both sound and scent across vast distances, signaling changes in the land, guiding hunters and herders alike, and revealing where food and water could be found. The tribe's movements were not haphazard. They were guided by observation, memory, and deep understanding of the rhythms of nature. Each morning began with soft light spilling over the horizon, painting the grasslands in shades of gold and green. Smoke curled from the lodges, a sign of life to those travelling nearby. Horses were saddled and adorned, packs carefully loaded with hides, tools, and supplies. Women and children travelled alongside men, forming a living caravan that stretched across the plains. Every member had a role. Scouts rode ahead, alert for changes in terrain or signs of other animals. Elders kept the route steady, ensuring the spirit of the tribe remained in balance with the land. And children learned by observing, their small hands and eyes absorbing the wisdom embedded in every step. Waterways were both guides and sustenance. Rivers curved through the grasslands like silver threads, reflecting clouds and sky. Camps were often set near bends, where fishing could supplement the meat of the hunt, and where wild plants could be gathered for food, medicine, or dye. Along the riverbanks, women and children collected roots, berries, and herbs. Some were pressed into early medicinal preparations, others dried for later use. Every plant had a purpose, every touch a lesson in respect and care. Through these migrations, the tribe maintained a delicate balance with the land. Hunting, gathering, and movement were interwoven with ceremony. Each time the buffalo were followed or the river crossed, offerings were made to the spirits of the earth and sky. Rituals of gratitude accompanied practical survival, reinforcing a philosophy that life must be honored and preserved, not merely used. Even in constant movement, there was rhythm, there was stillness within motion. The plains, with their endless horizon, demanded attentiveness, patience, and reverence. Every sunrise was a lesson, every gust of wind a whisper, every hoofbeat of a distant buffalo a call to mindfulness. The people moved as part of a greater whole, an extension of the land itself, flowing with its seasons, learning from its creatures, and guided by its sacred cycles. As the tribe pressed onward, their journey became more than survival. It became a living tapestry of memory, practice, and devotion. The land taught them, the buffalo fed them, and the spirits watched over them, ensuring that every step, every action, and every breath carried meaning. The plains were vast, but the people moved with certainty, knowing that to follow the buffalo was to follow life itself. The journey itself was a teaching, a living classroom. Elders pointed out the subtle signs of the plains, bent grasses that marked the passing of deer, broken branches signaling elk trails, and the tracks of predators stalking their prey. Children learned to recognize the wind's direction, the cloud's movement, and the distant call of birds, all woven together in a web of survival and wisdom. The buffalo remained the central focus of the tribe's movement. Herds were followed with patience and strategy. The people never chased recklessly, for they understood that respect was necessary to maintain the balance of life. Hunters observed from a distance, noting the herd's patterns, while women and elders prepared the camp for eventual sustenance. Horses, trained to endure long rides, carried both people and provisions, their hooves silent on soft grass, yet steady and sure on rugged terrain. At night, the tribe rested beneath the vast sky. Lodges or temporary shelters were arranged in careful circles, offering protection and maintaining community closeness. Fires glowed in the center, casting warmth and light. Stories were shared, not only to entertain but to instruct, to pass along survival strategies, honor the spirits of the land, and remember ancestors who had traveled these same plains for countless generations. Stars guided both spirit and direction, constellations marking the seasons and paths of migration. As the sun rose high over the endless prairie, the village hummed with quiet energy, each movement a thread in the fabric of communal life. The hunt had provided sustenance, and the following journeys had taught patience and harmony. But life on the Great Plains was as much about spirit as survival. The people understood that the buffalo, the land, and the sky were all part of a sacred cycle, and their ceremonies wove these elements together into a living tapestry of meaning and connection. At the center of the village, a fire burned constantly, its smoke spiraling upward like a bridge to the heavens. Elders, their faces etched with the lines of countless seasons, prepared for ceremony. Women brought bundles of sweetgrass and sage, weaving them into small braids and offering them to the flames. Children gathered close, their eyes wide, absorbing the chants, the rhythm of drums, and the scent of sacred herbs. These ceremonies were not merely ritual, they were lessons, a way to bind the community to the land and to one another. Songs rose with the wind, long, low, and resonant. Each chant told a story of buffalo that had fed the ancestors, of rivers that had carved the valleys, of the sun and moon as witnesses to life and death. Drums pounded in steady cadence, echoing the heartbeat of the earth itself. Dancers moved in circular patterns, skirts swaying and feathers brushing the ground. Each step a prayer, each turn an acknowledgement of the interconnectedness of all things. Feasts followed the ceremonies. Meat from the hunt was shared generously, not hoarded, for the people understood that abundance came from respect and reciprocity. Corn, beans, and squash, planted and tended with care, were boiled, roasted, and mashed into hearty dishes that filled the lodges with warmth and aroma. Sharing food was more than sustenance. It was a reaffirmation of community, a visible thread of the sacred cycle that connected earth, people, and spirit. Daily life, though practical, was suffused with reverence. Women continued to transform hides into clothing, bedding, and shelter, each cut and stitch guided by tradition. Children learned to recognize edible plants, to track animal paths, and to listen to the subtle language of wind, water, and wildlife. Men maintained weapons, cared for horses, and planned for the next hunt, always balancing necessity with respect. Every act, no matter how small, was imbued with awareness that life was a gift, not a guarantee. The sacred cycle was particularly evident in rites marking the seasons. Spring was for planting and gratitude, summer for growth and preparation, autumn for the hunt and celebration, and winter for reflection, storytelling, and rest. Each season brought rituals, songs, and prayers that reinforced the interconnectedness of all life. Even the youngest members of the tribe learned that survival depended not just on skill, but on humility, patience, and honor. Night on the plains was a moment of stillness. The sky unfurled into a tapestry of stars, constellations mirrored in the movement of the buffalo and the flowing of rivers. Fires glowed softly within lodges, casting long shadows across the sleeping village. Elders whispered stories of spirits and ancestors, while children drifted into slumber wrapped in robes made from the hides of buffalo that had given their lives to sustain the living. Coyotes' howls echoed from distant hills, and the wind carried the fragrance of sage, earth, and smoked meat. Through ceremonies, work, and community, the people of the Great Plains lived in harmony with the land and the buffalo. They understood that life was cyclical, that every birth, hunt, harvest, and song was part of a continuum stretching back through countless generations. The plains were not merely a place to survive. They were a sacred space, a living teacher, and a home whose lessons were written in the wind, the grass, and the hooves of the great herds. The spirit of the buffalo endured, not just in the meat, hides, or bones, but in the heart of the people who honored it. Life on the Great Plains was a song of gratitude, resilience, and reverence, a reminder that survival and spirituality were inseparable. And as the stars shone over the sleeping village, the people rested with the deep knowing that they were part of something eternal, a living cycle of land, life, and sacred connection that would guide them through the seasons to come. Time on the plains moved in quiet, measured rhythm. The warmth of summer gradually softened into the golden hush of autumn, and soon the air carried the unmistakable bite of winter's return. Mornings were sharp, their chill filling the lungs with clarity. The grass, once lush and waving, bent under frost, its tips silvered by ice. Streams slowed, and the rivers carried the last warmth of summer into quiet currents. The buffalo herds, having roamed far across the plains, now began to gather near sheltered valleys, their massive bodies pressing together for the cold months ahead. The village, too, prepared for the coming season. Lodges were reinforced, walls tightened with fresh hides, and insulation of fur and grass layered for warmth. Women repaired clothing, sewing thick robes and leggings, ensuring each stitch would protect against the icy winds. Children carried small bundles of firewood and kindling, learning the essential ways of preparation, of tending life through attention to detail. Men sharpened tools, checked bows and arrows, and prepared storehouses of dried meat and preserved vegetables. Every action was deliberate, a continuation of the sacred rhythm that guided the tribe through the seasons. The hunt had provided more than sustenance. It had replenished the community's strength and spirit. Buffalo bones became tools for everyday life. Hides became warm coverings. Sinew strengthened bowstrings. Hooves and stomachs were transformed into objects both practical and ceremonial. The people moved through these tasks with gratitude and reverence, understanding that their survival was inseparable from respect for the land and the animals that sustained them. Evenings grew long and still. The sun, lower in the sky, cast an amber glow that faded into violet, then deep indigo. Fires burned steadily in the lodges, filling the air with warmth and the scent of roasted meat. Families gathered close, sharing stories of the hunt, of spirits glimpsed in dreams, and of ancestors whose wisdom guided each step. Songs of gratitude rose into the night, mingling with the distant howls of coyotes and the soft whistle of wind through frost-laden grass. Rituals marked the passage of the season. Offerings were made to the buffalo and the spirits of the plains. Prayers whispered for protection, health, and abundance. Children were reminded of the cycle of life, of growth, harvest, and rest, and learned that patience and respect were as vital as skill and courage. Even in the quiet, frozen months, the people maintained harmony with the land, understanding that winter was not a threat, but a period of reflection, restoration, and preparation for the life that would inevitably return with spring. The buffalo, massive and enduring, mirrored this cycle. They rested, grazed carefully, and moved together, their presence a living testament to resilience and continuity. The people watched and learned from them, drawing lessons in strength, patience, and unity. Both human and animal, land and spirit existed in a sacred balance, a rhythm older than memory, stretching backward into time and forward into generations yet to come. In the stillness of winter, life did not pause, it deepened. The wind sang through empty grass, carrying the echoes of footsteps past. Stars sparkled over the silent plains, and the river, though slowed, continued its journey, weaving past frozen stones. Inside the lodges, hearts beat steadily, voices whispered prayers, and hands worked, creating warmth, sustenance, and beauty. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the plains waited, patient and eternal, ready for the first tremors of spring. buffalo would stir, rivers would flow more freely, and the land would awaken once again. Life, in all its sacred rhythm, continued, unbroken, timeless, and full of quiet majesty. The plains stretched endlessly, a sea of gold and green beneath an open sky that shifted from dawn's soft glow to the deep indigo of night. Life here had always moved in cycles, each season a thread woven into the larger tapestry of existence. Spring's renewal, summer's abundance, autumn's preparation, and winter's stillness were all part of a rhythm older than memory, older than the tallest hills and deepest rivers. The people of the Great Plains moved within this rhythm with quiet reverence. From the youngest child chasing the shadow of a rabbit to the elders telling stories beside a fire, every action was connected to the land, the sky, and the herds of buffalo that sustained them. The buffalo were more than food. They were teachers, guides, and living symbols of abundance, patience, and sacred balance. Their hooves had beaten paths into the soil for generations, and their presence shaped the very soul of the prairie. Even when the hunt ended, life did not stop. Men, women, and children worked together to transform the gifts of the buffalo into shelter, clothing, tools, and nourishment. They planted and tended gardens along riverbanks, harvested wild herbs, and prepared for the months ahead. Rituals and ceremonies tied each task to the spiritual, reminding all that survival was inseparable from gratitude and respect. Songs rose to the wind, prayers drifted to the sky, and the smoke of fires carried thanks to the unseen spirits of the plains. Movement across the land, following the herds, finding water, and reading the subtle signs of nature taught lessons of patience, observation, and harmony. Children learned to see the invisible threads that connected animal, river, wind, and human. Elders reminded all that knowledge was a living thing, passed from one generation to the next, preserved not in written word, but in story, song, and careful practice. Evenings were moments of reflection. Fires glowed inside lodges, laughter and song mingling with the flicker of flame. Outside, the plains were quiet, but alive. Coyotes called in the distance, wind whispered through grass, and the stars stretched endlessly above. The Milky Way arched like a silver river, reminding the people of journeys taken and yet to come. Through all the seasons, all the hunts, all the migrations, one truth remained. The plains, the people, and the buffalo were eternally connected. Life was not a race, but a rhythm, a sacred flow of energy that bound earth and spirit together. Each breath, each step, each heartbeat was part of this eternal dance. Long after the fires of the lodges had dimmed and the village lay quiet beneath the vast sky, the plains themselves seemed alive with memory. Every ridge, every river bend, every tall blade of grass carried the whispers of those who had walked here before. The ancestors whose hands had tended the land, whose eyes had tracked the herds, whose voices had sung the songs of life and survival. Even in sleep, the people of the plains felt the presence of these spirits. Children dreamed of running beside buffalo, their tiny hands reaching toward distant horns and the scent of wild grass. Hunters envisioned paths traced by generations, invisible trails marked only by observation and intuition. Elders, seated quietly by the remaining embers of a dying fire, spoke softly to the wind, offering thanks for guidance and protection, their words carrying across the silent prairie. The land itself was teacher and keeper. Winds brushed through tall grass, revealing hidden streams or recent animal tracks. Rivers whispered of the paths they had carved over centuries. Stones worn smooth by time bore witness to every hunt, every ceremony, every whispered prayer. Observing these signs required patience, reverence, and attentiveness, a lesson repeated in every action, from planting seeds to following the distant herd, and as night deepened, the village rested in quiet peace. Children drifted into sleep wrapped in robes of soft hide, the smell of cooked meat and sage lingering in the air. Elders closed their eyes, dreaming of ancestors and future generations, of hooves pounding across endless grass. Outside, the wind carried whispers of buffalo returning, of rivers flowing, of grass bending under the touch of life. The Great Plains remained, vast, timeless, and alive. The spirit of the buffalo lived in every heartbeat of the people who called this land home, and the people lived in harmony with the land, following the sacred rhythms of life, carrying forward the eternal lessons of survival, reverence, and unity. Here on the endless horizon, the story of the plains, the buffalo, and the people continued, unbroken, sacred, and eternal. The buffalo too carried memory. Each step of their massive hooves left imprints in the soil, guiding the people towards sustenance and understanding. Their strength, endurance, and quiet grace served as a mirror for human behavior. To move with awareness, to act with respect, to take only what was needed, and to honor every gift life offered. Communal life, intertwined with these lessons, deepened the connection between generations. Gatherings around fires were not simply for warmth or storytelling. They were ritualized spaces of learning. Children absorbed knowledge through observation, imitation, and gentle instruction. Women and men shared both practical skills and sacred wisdom: how to tan hides, how to read the clouds, how to prepare medicines from herbs and roots, and how to give thanks for the gifts of life. Every task, no matter how ordinary, was steeped in meaning. Evenings on the plains carried a sacred quiet. Stars, brilliant and innumerable, stretched across the sky, mirrored by the shimmer of dew on grass or frost on stones. Coyotes howled from distant hills, and the low murmur of rivers filled the spaces between. The people lay beneath the sky, listening, dreaming, and remembering that they were part of a larger whole, connected to ancestors, to the buffalo, to the land, and to each other. Through these whispers, the plains taught patience, humility, and reverence. They reminded the people that life was cyclical, that the herds would return, that the rivers would flow again, and that the seasons would continue their eternal dance. Survival was inseparable from respect. Prosperity was inseparable from balance. The stories, songs, and ceremonies of the people were the threads that wove human life into the vast tapestry of the land. And so, beneath the endless sky, the people slept with the knowledge that they were never truly alone. The spirits of ancestors walked beside them. The buffalo moved in distant herds, and the land itself breathed with quiet purpose. Life on the Great Plains was more than survival. It was participation in a sacred, unbroken cycle that connected past, present, and future in the eternal rhythm of earth, sky, and spirit. The sun rose gently over the plains, painting the grass in muted gold and green, and with it came a sense of continuity, a promise that life would endure through the hearts and hands of the next generation. Children, small and curious, explored the open prairie under the watchful eyes of their elders. Every step they took, every plant they touched, every track they followed was a lesson in the sacred rhythm of life. Elders spoke in soft tones, teaching not only practical skills, but also the philosophy of the land. How to track the buffalo, read the clouds, find water, and recognize the whisper of the wind were vital lessons. But more importantly, the young learned respect for animals, for the land, and for one another. Every action from planting seeds to mending hides carried the memory of ancestors and the guidance of spirits unseen. Hunting expeditions were as much about teaching as they were about sustenance. Children accompanied hunters, observing the movement of the herd, the sway of the grasses, and the signs of the buffalo. They were taught patience, how to wait silently, breathe evenly, and let the rhythm of the plains guide them. When arrows flew, elders reminded them that every life taken was sacred, and gratitude must accompany necessity. The buffalo, provider and teacher, became a living lesson in humility and respect. Women too guided the young, showing them how to transform the gifts of the hunt into sustenance and tools. They demonstrated the art of tanning hides, sewing garments, and preparing pemmican for long journeys. Each action was deliberate, teaching care, precision, and reverence. Children learned that these practices were not merely chores, but acts of devotion, ways to honor the earth and the animals that gave themselves to life. Communal ceremonies reinforced these lessons. Firelight flickered over the faces of children as songs rose into the night sky. Elders recited stories of ancestors, migrations, and sacred hunts, each narrative imbued with moral and practical wisdom. Dancing, drumming, and chanting became tools of education, embedding knowledge into memory, ensuring that the traditions of the plains would endure in both body and spirit. As the young grew, they began to assume responsibility. They guided younger children, assisted in preparing lodges, and took part in planting gardens along riverbanks. Their hands learned the weight of tools, the tension of a bowstring, and the rhythm of weaving hides. Through repetition, observation, and guidance, they became fully integrated into the life of the community, carrying forward the legacy of survival, respect, and spiritual connection. Above them, the buffalo continued their endless journey across the grasslands. Their movement, slow and deliberate, mirrored the teaching of the elders. Life was a cycle, a rhythm, and each generation must learn to move with it rather than against it. The plains whispered in every rustle of grass, in every ripple of river, in every gust of wind, guiding the young as the ancestors had guided their parents before them. By nightfall, the children rested beneath the stars, their dreams filled with the wisdom of the elders, the scent of the prairie, and the distant thunder of the buffalo hooves. The village glowed softly with firelight, a beacon of continuity, culture, and reverence. In the heart of the plains, life flowed onward, guided by tradition, respect, and the eternal bond between the people, the land, and the buffalo. The vision of the next generations was clear: to walk in harmony with the plains, to honor every gift the earth provided, and to ensure that the sacred rhythm of life would continue unbroken, season after season, for countless years to come. The plains moved in cycles older than memory, each season a teacher, each shift in wind and sky a message from the earth. Spring whispered of renewal, summer sang of growth, autumn murmured of preparation, and winter spoke in quiet reflection. The people of the Great Plains understood that life was inseparable from these cycles, that survival, spirituality, and community were all guided by the changing seasons. In spring, the world awakened with subtle gestures, the first shoots of grass, the return of migratory birds, and the soft murmur of thawing rivers. Children learned to read these signs, following the subtle hints of where the buffalo might roam, where water would flow, and where edible roots and herbs would emerge. Women tended gardens along riverbanks, planting corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, whose intertwining vines mirrored the interconnectedness of all life. Summer brought abundance and activity. The herds of buffalo roamed more freely, and the people followed, honing their skills and deepening their connection to the land. Every hunt, every gathering, every journey was guided by observation, patience, and respect. Tools were maintained, clothing repaired, and songs of gratitude rose with the wind, ensuring that even in times of plenty, humility remained at the heart of life. Autumn signaled preparation and reflection. The days grew shorter, the grass browner, and the rivers cooler. Harvests were stored, hides were prepared for the cold months ahead, and rituals honored both the living and the ancestors. Elders taught children the importance of planning, of foresight, and of gratitude for the gifts that life had offered. Camps grew quieter as the people focused on the essentials, preparing body, spirit, and home for the coming winter. Winter arrived with stillness, blanketing the plains in frost and snow. Life slowed, but it did not cease. Fires burned within lodges, and the smell of dried meat and herbal teas filled the air. Elders shared stories by firelight, recounting hunts, migrations, and the wisdom of generations past. Children listened, learning that patience, reflection, and reverence were as vital as action. Even in the quiet, the plains were alive with teaching. The whisper of the wind through frozen grass, the faint tracks of animals in snow, and the distant movement of the buffalo reminded all that life never truly paused. Through these rhythms, the people of the Great Plains discovered balance. They understood that each season offered lessons in survival, adaptation, and spirituality. By moving in harmony with the cycles of the earth, they ensured not only their sustenance, but also the continuity of their culture, their traditions, and their sacred relationship with the buffalo and the land. And as night fell over the wintered plains, stars blanketed the sky, mirrored by frost on the grass below. Fires glowed softly in the lodges, children slept wrapped in hides, and the village exhaled a quiet, collective breath. The cycles of the seasons had taught patience, reverence, and resilience. They had reminded the people of their place in the vast, eternal rhythm of the plains, where each generation lived, learned, and honored the sacred dance of life. The wisdom of the seasons was eternal. It guided the young, strengthened the elders, and carried the people forward, seamlessly connecting past, present, and future in the endless, sacred journey of the Great Plains. As dawn brushed the horizon with soft gold, the Great Plains seemed to hum with a quiet, eternal melody. The wind moved through the tall grasses, carrying the whispers of the buffalo, the laughter of children, and the steady rhythm of rivers. Every element, the soil, the sky, the animals, and the people, joined together in a song older than memory, a song that spoke of life, survival, and sacred connection. The people listened, their hearts beat in time with the plains, their breath in rhythm with the wind. Hunters, returning from distant journeys, spoke little, for words were unnecessary when the land itself conveyed meaning. Women tended fires and gardens, children explored with wide eyes, and elders watched over all, guardians of knowledge and tradition. Each person moved as part of the melody, their actions harmonizing with the eternal flow of life. The buffalo were the heart of this song. Their massive hooves drummed softly against the earth, their presence shaping the rhythm of human life and the pulse of the prairie. To watch them was to learn patience, to follow them, to understand balance, to honor them, to know gratitude. Every hunt, every gesture of care, every offering of thanks became a note in the larger symphony that echoed across hills, rivers, and valleys. As day turned to dusk, the plains glowed under the setting sun, a tapestry of gold, amber, and violet. Fires within the lodges glimmered like distant stars brought to earth. Families gathered close, sharing stories, meals, and quiet laughter. Songs rose into the wind, songs of gratitude, of reverence, of memory. Drums pulsed softly, echoing the heartbeat of the people and the land alike. Even as night fell and stars emerged in countless numbers, the plains continued to sing. Coyotes called from distant ridges, rivers whispered over stones, and the gentle rustle of grasses under the touch of wind became part of the melody. Children slept wrapped in hides, dreaming of buffalo roaming vast horizons, of ancestors' voices carried by the wind, of rivers flowing endlessly toward unseen horizons. The people knew they were part of something greater, something eternal. Life on the plains was not a series of events, but a continuous, sacred song, one that connected generations past, present, and future. Every act, from planting seeds to performing ceremony, every moment, from the first light of dawn to the quiet of midnight, was a note in this unbroken harmony. In this song, the buffalo and the people moved as one with the land. They taught, they guided, they nurtured. The plains themselves seemed to breathe with understanding, whispering lessons in patience, gratitude, and reverence. The wind carried the voices of ancestors and the promise of the generations yet to come, ensuring that the melody of the Great Plains would never cease. And as the village settled into quiet slumber beneath the infinite sky, the song of the plains continued, soft, eternal, and sacred, reminding all who listened that life, in its fullest expression, was a harmony to be honored, a rhythm to follow, and a gift to cherish forever. Beneath the endless sky of the Great Plains, a profound connection wove together the people, the land, and the buffalo. This bond was more than survival. It was spiritual, cultural, and eternal. From the first step of a child beside their mother to the measured stride of a hunter tracking the herd, every action reflected respect for the animal whose presence sustained life in body and spirit. The buffalo were teachers. Their strength, endurance, and quiet dignity revealed lessons in patience and balance. Watching them move across the plains, the people learned to observe without disturbing, to anticipate without rushing, and to act only when guided by wisdom. Every hoofbeat that shook the soil was a reminder of the pulse of life itself, a rhythm that echoed in the hearts of those who followed and honored the herds. Hunting was not taken lightly. Preparation involved rituals, prayers, and offerings to the spirits of the buffalo and the land. Hunters painted their faces with symbols of protection and gratitude. Feathers braided into hair whispered of the wind, and bows and arrows were treated as sacred instruments rather than mere tools. The act of taking life was always balanced by respect, understanding that the buffalo's sacrifice nourished not only the body, but the community and the spirit of the people. After the hunt, every part of the buffalo was transformed with care. Hides became lodges, robes, and clothing. Bones were shaped into tools, sinew into threads, and even hooves and stomachs found purpose in everyday and ceremonial life. Women, children, and elders worked together, ensuring that nothing went unused, that every fragment carried meaning and honor. Through these acts, the sacred bond between people and buffalo was reaffirmed, grounding the tribe in gratitude and interconnectedness. This bond extended beyond the practical. Ceremony celebrated the buffalo as spiritual guides, honoring their presence in song, dance, and prayer. Drums echoed the heartbeat of the herd, chants rose with the wind, and sacred fires carried offerings skyward. In these moments, the people were reminded that they were part of a larger world, a world where every creature, river, and hill had life, spirit, and story. Children, observing these rituals and daily labors, absorbed the lessons of respect and responsibility. They learned that survival was inseparable from care, that abundance required gratitude, and that harmony with the land was both duty and privilege. Elders watched patiently, guiding the young with gentle hands and quiet wisdom, ensuring that the sacred bond between people and buffalo would endure through the generations. Even in stillness, the connection persisted. When the herds moved across distant horizons, their presence was felt in the heartbeat of the plains. When rivers sang or wind whispered through grass, the voices of the buffalo seemed to join the song. The people in turn honored this ongoing relationship through every act, every offering, and every moment of reverent observation. And so, the sacred bond continued, timeless, unbroken, and essential. It was a dance of life and respect, a reminder that the plains were not merely a home, but a teacher, that the buffalo were not merely animals, but guides, and that the people, in living with honor and gratitude, were the guardians of a tradition older than memory, carried forward in the rhythm of seasons, the pulse of the land, and the eternal heartbeat of the Great Plains. Night fell softly over the Great Plains, wrapping the land in a deep, velvety quiet. Stars shimmered above like scattered diamonds, stretching endlessly across the horizon. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying faint echoes of past hunts, distant herds, and the footsteps of ancestors. In this vast stillness, the people paused, listening not with ears alone, but with the whole of themselves, the heart, the mind, and the spirit. The lodges glowed faintly from within, firelight flickering across the faces of those who had lived and worked through another day in harmony with the plains. Elders sat in silence, eyes reflecting both memory and wisdom, while children drifted into dreams filled with rivers, buffalo, and endless horizons. Men and women tended to their tools and garments, their movements steady and mindful, honoring the land and the life it provided. In this quiet, the people reflected on their place within the cycles of life. They knew that the plains were more than home. They were teacher, guide, and keeper of sacred knowledge. Every gust of wind, every ripple of river, every distant drumbeat of buffalo hooves reminded them that life moved in rhythms larger than themselves. To follow these rhythms was to honor the past, sustain the present, and prepare for the future. The buffalo, silhouetted against the moonlit grasslands, moved with measured grace. Their presence was both awe-inspiring and humbling. The people understood that each herd carried the essence of life itself, the strength of the land, the continuity of the seasons, and the memory of generations. To witness them was to witness the pulse of the plains, and to live in accordance with that pulse was the highest form of reverence. Rituals, though unseen in the quiet night, continued in spirit. Thoughts of gratitude, whispered prayers, and mental offerings flowed upward with the smoke of fading embers. Songs, now soft and internal, echoed in the minds of those resting, connecting them to ancestors, to the buffalo, and to the unbroken circle of life. Each heartbeat mirrored the rhythm of the land, each breath synchronized with the winds across the open plains. Children dreamed of running beside the herds, of learning from the elders, and of walking the sacred paths of their ancestors. Adults reflected on the work of the day, the lessons of patience, and the ever-present guidance of nature. And elders, the living bridges between past and future, breathed with quiet satisfaction, knowing that the sacred knowledge of the plains was alive in each heart, ready to continue through the next generation. The plains themselves seemed to sigh with contentment. The grass bent gently, rivers rippled quietly, and the stars pulsed with ancient light. In this serene harmony, all who lived here, the people, the buffalo, the land, were united in a single sacred existence. The cycle of life, death, and renewal moved unbroken, eternal, and profound. And so, under the endless sky, life on the Great Plains existed in perfect balance. The people rested, the buffalo roamed, and the land whispered its timeless wisdom. In the stillness of night, a deep understanding settled in every heart. They were part of something eternal, something sacred, a rhythm older than memory, guiding them always in the infinite dance of life across the vast and beautiful plains. Dawn broke slowly over the Great Plains, a soft golden light spilling across rolling grasses, rivers glinting like silver ribbons, and distant hills outlined in hazy blue. The land, vast and infinite, seemed to breathe with the pulse of countless generations. Here, life moved in cycles both visible and unseen, a rhythm that guided every step of the people, the animals, and the earth itself. The buffalo herds, massive and steady, moved across the horizon with the quiet assurance of time itself. Their hooves pressed into the soil, leaving temporary marks that would soon fade, but their presence was enduring, an echo of the sacred bond that had existed for centuries between creature and human. The people watched, learned, and followed, understanding that to live in harmony with these animals was to live in harmony with the land and the cycles of life. Daily routines unfolded with the familiar cadence of survival, care, and devotion. Women tended fires, gardens, and hides, transforming the gifts of the land and the hunt into sustenance, tools and warmth. Men repaired weapons, tended horses, and prepared for journeys. Children, their eyes wide with wonder and curiosity, absorbed lessons not in words alone, but in observation, experience, and the silent teachings of nature itself. Each day was a continuation of the sacred cycle, each task a meditation, each interaction a thread in the vast tapestry of life. The seasons moved as they always had, spring awakening the prairie with tender green, summer bringing abundance, autumn calling for preparation, and winter inviting stillness and reflection. The people moved with the seasons, following the herds, planting and harvesting, celebrating and mourning, always aware of the interwoven rhythm of life, death, and renewal. They knew that patience, reverence, and understanding were as essential as skill and strength. Ceremonies continued to anchor the spiritual life of the community. Fires burned, drums echoed, and songs rose into the sky, carrying gratitude and prayer for the buffalo, the land, and the ancestors. The elders guided these rituals, ensuring that each generation absorbed the wisdom of those who came before, and that the lessons of respect, balance, and harmony would endure. The sacred bond between people and buffalo, between human and land, was reaffirmed in every offering, every gesture, every whispered prayer. At night the plains were a living dream. Stars stretched infinitely, reflecting in rivers and shimmering on frost-kissed grasses. The wind carried the memory of footsteps, the scent of dried meat and sage, the distant echo of hoofbeats. Children slept beneath soft hides, dreaming of distant horizons and roaming herds, while elders gazed quietly at the sky, connecting the past, present, and future in the silent rhythm of the world. The eternal journey of life on the plains was clear. The land and its creatures, the people and their traditions, all moved together in a sacred, unbroken cycle. Every sunrise and sunset, every season and migration, every hunt and ceremony was a note in the enduring song of the plains. Life was not merely survival, it was participation in a timeless harmony, a meditation on existence, a profound recognition of interconnectedness. And so, as the plains stretched endlessly under the vast sky, the people, the buffalo, and the land continued together, forever moving, learning, teaching, and honoring one another. The rhythm of life carried on, eternal, sacred, and unyielding, a living testament to the enduring spirit of the Great Plains and the profound connection that shaped every heartbeat of those who called it home. The Great Plains stretched endlessly beneath a sky that shifted from soft morning gold to the deep blue of midday, carrying the quiet pulse of life across every hill, river, and blade of grass. Here, the people moved with awareness, not as masters of the land, but as its stewards, guardians of a legacy older than memory. Every step they took, every decision they made, reflected an understanding that survival depended not only on skill, but on respect, reverence, and balance. The buffalo, moving steadily across the horizon, remained both provider and teacher. Their presence was a reminder that life on the plains was communal, humans, animals, and land existing in a continuous circle of giving and receiving. Hunters followed with patience, guided by observation and tradition. Women prepared hides, mended garments, and tended gardens, ensuring the continuity of daily life. Children watched, learning the sacred duties of guardianship, absorbing the lessons hidden in every movement of the grass, every rustle of the wind, and every distant drumbeat of hooves. Ceremony anchored these responsibilities. Fires burned with the smoke of offerings, and songs of gratitude rose to the sky. Drums echoed softly, mimicking the heartbeat of both people and buffalo, tying human action to the rhythm of the plains. Elders guided prayers for the herds, the rivers, and the soil itself, teaching that to honor the land was to honor life, and to harm it was to harm oneself. Through these rituals, the sacred connection between human, buffalo, and earth was reaffirmed, generation after generation. As seasons shifted, the role of guardian expanded. Spring demanded careful planting and observation. Summer required vigilance and patience. Autumn called for preparation and preservation. And winter invited reflection and storytelling. Each season brought lessons in resilience, adaptability, and humility. The young learned that guardianship was not a single act, but a lifelong practice, one that required attentiveness, gratitude, and unwavering respect for the balance of all things. Even in moments of stillness, the plains were alive with teaching. The wind carried the whispers of ancestors, the rivers hummed with memory, and the distant movements of buffalo reinforced the sacred rhythm of existence. Every sunrise was a call to responsibility, every sunset a reminder of gratitude, every heartbeat an affirmation of connection. In the quiet of night, beneath an infinite canopy of stars, the village rested. Fires glimmered softly inside the lodges, the scent of smoked meat and sage lingering in the air. Children dreamed of running beside the herds, of learning the ancient ways, and of one day becoming guardians themselves. Elders, watchful and serene, felt the continuity of their people and their land, knowing that the sacred bond would endure. The plains themselves seemed to breathe in approval. The buffalo moved gracefully across hills and valleys, rivers shimmered under moonlight, and the wind whispered through the grass with quiet authority. Life in all its complexity and beauty continued, sustained by vigilance, guided by tradition, and nurtured by the understanding that humans were caretakers, not conquerors. The people of the Great Plains lived not merely to survive, but to preserve, protect, and honor the land and its creatures. In this role, they became true guardians, keepers of wisdom, stewards of the sacred cycle, and witnesses to the eternal journey of life across the vast and timeless prairie. The sun rose slowly over the Great Plains, spilling warm light across the sweeping grasses, rivers, and distant hills. Every inch of this land carried memory, the footsteps of ancestors, the passage of buffalo herds, and the stories of countless generations who had lived in harmony with the earth. The people of the plains understood that they were both inheritors and stewards of this legacy, a trust that demanded respect, reverence, and care. Children moved through the village with curiosity and wonder, their eyes wide as they absorbed the lessons of daily life. Elders taught them to track the subtle signs of the land, to recognize the paths of animals, and to read the clouds for approaching storms. They learned that survival depended on skill, observation, and patience, but that true wisdom came from understanding the deeper rhythm of the world, the sacred cycle of life, death, and renewal. Hunting, planting, and preparing for the seasons were acts that tied the present to the past. Every arrow released, every seed planted, and every hide prepared was a continuation of the traditions carried by generations before. The buffalo were honored not only for their physical contributions, but for the spiritual guidance they offered. Each hunt was a lesson in humility, gratitude, and interconnectedness. The ceremonies that marked the cycles of the year carried forward this legacy. Drums echoed the heartbeat of the land, songs rose with the wind, and fires burned as offerings to the spirits of the plains. Elders guided these rituals, passing down stories, knowledge, and practices that ensured the continuity of culture. Children watched and participated, understanding that every movement, every chant, every gesture carried meaning beyond the immediate, connecting them to ancestors, to the land, and to the generations yet to come. The legacy of the plains was also a lesson in balance. The people learned that abundance required respect, that taking without gratitude brought disharmony, and that true stewardship meant living in harmony with both animals and earth. They observed the movements of the buffalo, the flow of rivers, and the changes of the seasons, learning that every element of the land was alive with purpose and teaching. As night fell, the plains glowed under the light of countless stars. Fires in the lodges cast warm reflections across the snow, dew, or tall grass, and the scent of roasted meat and sage drifted gently through the village. Children slept wrapped in hides, dreaming of herds and distant horizons. Elders gazed quietly at the sky, feeling the continuity of life and the enduring presence of those who had walked before them. The buffalo moved across hills and valleys, their movements as timeless as the rhythm of the seasons. The legacy of the plains was more than survival. It was knowledge, reverence, and connection. It was the understanding that humans were part of a larger whole, and that their actions shaped the land, the herds, and future generations. It was the wisdom that life on the Great Plains was not merely to be lived, but to be honored, preserved, and celebrated. And so, under the vast, endless sky, the people of the plains carried forward their inheritance, the sacred bond with the buffalo, the lessons of the seasons, and the stories of their ancestors. They walked with reverence, lived with gratitude, and ensured that the legacy of the plains would endure, eternal and unbroken, in the hearts of those who would follow. The Great Plains stretched endlessly beneath a sky that seemed to hold the memory of every sunrise and sunset ever witnessed. Wind whispered across the grass, rivers shimmered under the sun, and the distant silhouettes of buffalo moved with quiet certainty across the horizon. Here, life flowed in an unbroken circle, a rhythm older than any human memory, yet alive in every heartbeat, every breath, every step. The people of the plains lived in harmony with this circle, understanding that their existence was inseparable from the land, the animals, and the cycles of the seasons. Children learned by watching, by following, and by participating. Elders guided with gentle wisdom, their stories weaving together the lessons of the past, the responsibilities of the present, and the hopes of the future. Every action, planting, hunting, crafting, or tending fire, was a note in the eternal song of life. The buffalo, central to this circle, moved as they always had, their hooves pressing into the soil, leaving impressions that would fade, but whose spirit endured. They were teachers of patience, endurance, and respect. The people honored them in thought, word, and deed, understanding that the sacred bond between human and buffalo was a reflection of balance with the world itself. The life of the herd, mirrored the cycles of the people: growth, movement, sustenance, and renewal. As the seasons turned, the circle revealed its wisdom. Spring brought awakening, summer abundance, autumn preparation, and winter reflection. The people moved in tandem with these rhythms, planting and harvesting, observing and learning, celebrating and pausing. They understood that survival was not only about skill or strength, but about attentiveness, gratitude, and living in harmony with the land and all its creatures. Evenings on the plains carried a special stillness. Fires glowed softly within the lodges, casting warm light on faces lined with experience and hope. Children slept beneath hides, dreaming of buffalo roaming endless horizons and rivers weaving through the grasslands. Elders watched the stars, tracing patterns that had guided generations before them, feeling the eternal connection between past, present, and future. The sacred circle extended beyond the people and the buffalo. Rivers, hills, and grasslands pulsed with the rhythm of life. Every gust of wind, every rustle of grass, every ripple in the water reminded the people that they were part of a greater whole, a continuum of existence that demanded respect, mindfulness, and care. In this eternal circle, nothing truly ended. Life flowed in continuity. Lessons passed from one generation to the next. The bond with the buffalo and the land reaffirmed in each heartbeat and every step. The plains themselves seemed to breathe, carrying the wisdom of ancestors, the vitality of the present, and the promise of the future. And so, beneath the infinite sky, the people, the buffalo, and the land moved together in harmony. Life on the Great Plains was a circle unbroken, sacred and eternal, a dance of balance, reverence, and connection that carried forward the spirit of the plains forever in every heart, every story, and every step upon the vast and timeless prairie. The Great Plains pulsed with life, a quiet, enduring heartbeat that stretched from horizon to horizon. Every blade of grass, every ripple in a river, every movement of the buffalo herds carried rhythm, echoing through the land like the slow, steady drum of existence itself. To the people who called this place home, this heartbeat was more than sound. It was guidance, a reminder of connection, and the ever-present force that wove together all life. Children rose with the sun, their small hands brushing dew from grass, eyes bright with curiosity. Elders guided them along ancient trails, pointing out tracks, listening to the whispers of wind, and teaching the subtle language of the land. Every step, every breath, every glance was a lesson. The plains spoke constantly, and those who listened carefully learned the wisdom of survival, patience, and harmony. The buffalo moved like living mountains, their bodies shifting as one with the pulse of the earth. Hunters followed with reverent silence, observing the patterns of the herds, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with taking life. Women transformed hides into garments and tools. Children carried kindling and gathered herbs, and elders taught the sacred songs that honored both the land and the creatures that sustained them. Every action, small or large, contributed to the heartbeat of the plains. Seasons flowed like currents through time. Spring brought renewal, with the first shoots of corn and the gentle return of migratory birds. Summer unfolded in abundance, filled with the rustle of tall grasses and the distant thunder of buffalo hooves. Autumn demanded preparation as people stored food and strengthened lodges for the cold months ahead. Winter brought quiet reflection when the fires within lodges burned low and stars mirrored the frost on the earth. Through it all, the heartbeat of the plains remained steady, reminding all of life's continuity. The spiritual rhythm was just as essential as the physical. Ceremonies honored the buffalo, the ancestors, and the spirits of the land. Drums echoed like distant thunder, songs rose with the wind, and smoke carried prayers across rivers and valleys. Children listened, absorbing lessons of gratitude, humility, and reverence. The people knew that every heartbeat of the land, every gust of wind, every movement of the herd carried wisdom older than any memory, a wisdom that guided both daily life and the soul. As night fell, the plains exhaled a serene hush. Stars sparkled endlessly, reflecting in rivers and on frost-tipped grass. The lodges glowed warmly, the smell of smoked meat and herbs drifting into the night air. Children slept beneath thick hides, dreaming of the buffalo, the wind, and the endless horizon. Elders watched quietly, feeling the heartbeat of the land in their own chests, knowing that the sacred rhythm continued unbroken. The winds of the Great Plains carried stories older than stone, whispers of ancestors, and the quiet songs of the buffalo herds. They moved with purpose, threading through tall grasses, rippling across rivers, and stirring the hearts of those who listened. To the people of the plains, these winds were more than air. They were carriers of memory, teachers of wisdom, and reminders that life was woven from the past, present, and future. Children ran through the prairie, chasing the swirling currents of wind, feeling its touch on their faces, learning to sense its messages. Elders walked slowly, attentive to every shift, pointing out how the wind bent grass, rustled leaves, or traced the paths of animals. Each gust carried knowledge, where water could be found, where the buffalo were grazing, and when storms might arrive. Listening to the winds was learning to understand the land itself. The buffalo moved with the rhythm of the plains, their hooves beating steady echoes that harmonized with the whispers of the air. Hunters followed carefully, observing patterns, sensing change, and moving in alignment with both the animals and the elements. Women prepared hides and preserved meat, sewing and crafting with reverent attention. Every task, every moment of daily life was informed by memory, by the accumulated wisdom of generations who had walked these same trails, watched these same herds, and felt the same winds. Seasons passed, each leaving an imprint on the landscape and the people. Spring's renewal, summer's abundance, autumn's preparation, and winter's quiet reflection were recorded not only in memory, but in the very patterns of the land. Fires burned in lodges, songs rose with the smoke, and stories of hunts, migrations, and ancestors filled the night air. Children absorbed these lessons, carrying them forward in heart and mind, ensuring the continuity of knowledge and tradition. The winds also carried the sacred, intangible lessons of life: humility, gratitude, and balance. They reminded the people that the buffalo were teachers, that the earth was alive, and that every action had consequence. Each whisper of air through the grass, each ripple in the river, each distant echo of hooves was a message. To live in harmony with the plains was to honor the eternal cycle of life. As night descended, the stars emerged, mirrored by frost or dew on the ground. Fires glimmered softly within lodges, the smell of herbs and smoked meat drifting upward. Children slept, their dreams filled with the echoes of ancestors, the murmur of the wind, and the distant thunder of buffalo hooves. Elders sat quietly, feeling the pulse of the plains and the weight of memory carried by the winds. They knew that the past was never gone. It moved through the present, guiding the people, shaping the land, and ensuring the continuity of the sacred rhythm. The winds of memory were eternal, carrying wisdom, life, and spirit across the Great Plains. They connected generations, tied the people to their ancestors, and reminded all who listened that the lessons of the past were alive in every step, every breath, and every heartbeat. Under the vast sky, the winds whispered, teaching that life was not only to be lived, but remembered, honored, and carried forward in reverence and harmony. The Great Plains shifted constantly under the passage of the sun, a living landscape of shadows and light. Morning mist clung to the grasses, blurring the edges of hills and rivers. Sunlight spilled over the horizon, casting long, golden beams that danced across the prairie, illuminating the subtle movements of life. Every day was a study in contrasts, the soft and the strong, the still and the moving, the seen and the unseen. And the people of the plains moved in harmony with these rhythms. Children played in the dappled sunlight, their laughter echoing across the hills, their small shadows stretching and shrinking with the rise and fall of the sun. Elders taught them to read the changing light, to understand how it shifted with the seasons, and to observe the behavior of animals as they responded to its warmth and shadow. The plains themselves were alive with lessons: how to follow tracks in the soft morning glow, how to find shade in the high noon, and how to sense danger in the flicker of a shadow at twilight. Buffalo herds moved like living waves, their dark silhouettes stark against the shimmering light of the grass. Hunters observed the play of light on their backs, reading the patterns of movement and learning the quiet language of survival. Women worked near riverbanks and lodges, using the light to guide their hands as they prepared food, sewed hides, and cared for the young. Every task was informed by observation, patience, and the subtle interplay of shadows and illumination. As the sun reached its peak, the plains radiated a warm, golden energy. Rivers sparkled like ribbons of glass, the tall grasses swayed rhythmically, and birds soared, casting fleeting shadows upon the earth. The people of the plains felt this energy within themselves, a steady connection to the pulse of the land. They understood that light revealed, while shadow concealed, that both were necessary for understanding, growth, and survival. Evening brought long, stretching shadows, a gentle coolness, and a quiet hush over the prairie. Fires glimmered softly within lodges, reflecting in the eyes of children and elders alike. Songs and stories rose, shadows dancing across the walls, illuminating faces and weaving memory into every corner. The interplay of light and dark became a meditation, a teaching. Life was a balance of visible and hidden, of action and reflection, of learning and remembering. Nightfall blanketed the plains in deep blue and silver. Stars emerged one by one, their faint light reflecting in rivers and on frost-covered grasses. Coyotes howled softly in the distance, their shadows stretching across the hills. The people slept beneath the canopy of sky, dreaming of buffalo, rivers, and ancestors. The contrast of shadow and light had guided their day, taught their lessons, and reminded them that life was a delicate harmony of forces, each shaping the other in eternal rhythm. The plains whispered in every flicker, rustle and reflection, teaching that to live with awareness was to honor both the light and the shadow. Life, like the day, unfolded in patterns of illumination and concealment, and those who learned to move with both were in harmony with the sacred rhythm of the land, the herds, and the cycles of existence. The Great Plains stretched beyond the eye, a vast living canvas where the wind, the rivers, the grasses, and the buffalo all moved in a rhythm older than memory. Here, life unfolded in cycles of growth, reflection, and renewal, a sacred harmony that connected the people to the land, the animals, and the generations that came before and after. The people of the plains lived in profound awareness of this rhythm. Every action, planting, hunting, crafting, or teaching, was a note in the eternal song of life. Every breath, every step, every gesture carried respect, gratitude, and understanding. They were not conquerors of the land, but its guardians, walking with humility, listening with care, and honoring the sacred bond between human, animal, and earth. Buffalo herds moved across the horizon like living mountains, their presence both guiding and sustaining the people. They were teachers of endurance, patience, and reverence. The sacred bond between the people and the buffalo reminded all who lived on the plains that life was interconnected and that to honor one was to honor all. The cycles of the seasons, the interplay of shadows and light, the whispers of the wind, and the quiet pulse of rivers all carried lessons for those who listened. Children learned through observation, elders guided with wisdom, and stories and ceremonies passed knowledge from one generation to the next. Every heartbeat of the plains, every flicker of firelight, every rustle of grass reinforced the sacred continuity of life. As night fell, the stars mirrored the vastness of the plains. The fires glowed warmly in lodges, and the land seemed to breathe with quiet contentment. The people rested, dreaming of buffalo herds, flowing rivers, and endless horizons. The plains, in turn, held them in a timeless embrace, carrying forward the sacred rhythm of life, unbroken and eternal. Life on the Great Plains was more than survival. It was reverence, connection, and balance. It was a meditation on existence, a dance with the land, a harmony of generations, and a bond with every living being that shared the prairie. The spirit of the plains endured in every story told, every song sung, and every step taken upon its vast, timeless horizon. And so, the Great Plains continued to breathe, to teach, and to guide. The people, the buffalo, and the land moved together in sacred unity, a living testament to the eternal cycles of life, a rhythm that, like the wind, the grass, and the stars above, would never cease. The plains whispered, and all who listened knew, life, in its fullest, deepest sense, is a sacred journey, infinite, harmonious, and eternal.